Good afternoon, all of you. Um, so this is a very important day for all of us in the history of modern India, because on this day, two revolutionaries were born. One is Savitribai Phule, whose birthday we are celebrating today as Education Day. In Maharashtra, in many places, it is celebrated as Teachers' Day as well. We in Tuljapur celebrate generally as an Education Day. Okay, coming back to the question of celebrating Savitribai Phule's birthday as an Education Day. So we every year organize, since last 6-7 years, we are organizing um, lectures on this specific day. Earlier used to also hold various competition among the school children in Tuljapur, but subsequently, yes, and especially this year, because of the pandemic, we are limiting it to just a lecture. And we are very happy that Mr. Tanoj Meshram is with us. Move on to our uh, speaker, Mr. Tanoj Meshram. Before he speaks, I would like to request Jadida Asriel to please introduce our guest speaker today.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is with great pleasure that I take this opportunity to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Tanoj Meshram. Mr. Tanoj is a social and public policy professional with over 23 years of experience in government, non-profits, and academia. He has worked in the Indian Railways, the NTPC, the Azim Premji Foundation, the Brandeis University, and the Indian Institute of Human Settlements. His expertise has been in the domain of general management, social and public policies and their implementation, and education leadership and management. His other research interests include education inequality, representation of underprivileged sections in education governance and its impact, social inequality, and anti caste movements and politics. Mr. Tanoj has also demonstrated his commitment to social justice and social change by volunteering for anti caste social movements for over 20 years and by advocating the cause of social change from various platforms through public speaking, writing, and networking. Mr. Tanuj Meshram has completed his graduation in mechanical engineering from the Government College of Engineering, Amravati in 1995 and joined the Indian Engineering Services in 1999. Subsequently, he completed his Masters in Public Management and Policy from the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad in 2009 and did his MA in Social Policy from Heller School for Social Policy and Management at Brandeis University in 2016. He also participated in the IIM Ahmedabad Fall Fellows Program on Public Policy, Governance and Leadership at Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs, the University of Texas at Austin, USA in 2009, and later completed a course on international education policy from the Harvard Extension School. At present, he is working on his doctoral thesis in social policy at Heller School for Social Policy and Management in Brandeis University. By using a qualitative case study of the implementation of the Right to Education Act and the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan in two districts of Maharashtra, he is trying to answer why there is a gap between policy, implementation, and outcomes. This research is expected to help the policymakers and policy advocates to work together on policy and institutional reforms in order to improve the implementation and outcomes of not only education but also other social policies. With this brief introduction, I present to you our speaker of the day, Mr. Tanuj Mishra.
Uh, yeah, thank you, Jed. Yes, now we have a speaker, Mr. Tanoj. Now over to you, Mr. Tanoj Masram. Thank you.
Uh, thank you everyone. Thank you, especially Professor Morana, for inviting me for this talk. Professor Jare, it has been great to meet you, and I'm really very happy that the TISS Turjapur celebrates this day, which is very, very important actually. And it's not just important to celebrate, but your thought, someone like me who's passionate about reforms in school education actually, as a worthy speaker to come and talk to you people actually. So I really consider that my privilege actually to talk to all the friends in TISS as well as outside who have joined actually. This is very important day for us, and I would. You have given a good introduction of Savitribai Phule's work actually, and situated that in a historical context. To get started, I will start with her very I would call it a very important and a provocative poem actually from a book, A Forgotten Liberator actually. It just stuck to me. Someone who's trying to work on reforms in education. I think that poem speaks a lot actually. So that poem is Go Get Education. Is titled as Go Get Education. So poem starts like, be self-reliant, be industrious, work, gather wisdom and riches. All gets lost without knowledge. We become animals without wisdom. Sit idle no more. Go get education. End misery of the oppressed and the forsaken. You have got a golden chance to learn. So learn and break the chains of caste. Throw away the Brahmins' scriptures fast. And this is how the poem ends actually. Very important. I mean, this go get education and end the misery of the oppressed is something I would call a very important thread that you find among all the anti-caste thinkers actually. The way they looked at education, the way they looked at education, and especially in the aims of the education. The Professor Moharna has given us a context actually what exactly was going on there actually in the space of education. To add to that, Dr. Ambedkar in one of his books says that one of the cardinal principles of the Brahminism, the philosophy of the caste and the patriarchy, we can call that time, it denied education to the Shudras and Atishudras and women, what we call today's Bahujans and women. So that's a social context in which Phule is actually, Savitribai and Jyotiba operated actually. And they had three important tasks in front of them, I would say. One, establish aims of education. It's very, very important to understand that time we talk about in the context of national curricular framework, what are the aims of education actually. Just look at these thinkers in the modern India. They are trying to tell the masses that education is important for us. So what that education will do to us, or what it should do to us actually, So that establishment of the aims of education through their work and their education of the masses, social education of the persuasion of the masses was very, very important task. I think they have taken in hand, establishing the aim. The second one was educating masses about importance of an education, making them understand that education is an instrument of social change and most important asset, because they didn't have any other asset actually. You have talked about the social condition of the Pune at that time actually, and the situation was broadly similar in many other parts of the country. So it was important for that time, it was important for them to tell the masses about the importance of education. And the third thing that they were doing actually is to either persuade or pressurize the rulers, British that time, native latter actually, the Phules and their successor, to provide education to the Bahujans actually, and for that, if any necessary legal changes are required, those need to be done. So the memo, which was memorandum, which was given to the Hunter Commission, or the Baba Sahib's work, continuously always telling the British that the education of the Bahujans, the untouchables, and the women are very, very important actually. Shah's own ruling actually to provide education to the Bahujans that time, Shudras and Atishudras, established schools and hostels, and passionate implementation of these policies falls also in the same domain actually. The fourth thing that this Savitribai Phule and the successors have done is establishing, I would say, the model schools or institutions actually to provide the kind of education that they wanted actually. It's important actually. your aims of education may not align with the aims of education of the rulers actually. And therefore it is important to demonstrate that you are able to provide an education. You have a model actually. You are able to provide an education which will actually liberate the masses from the misery and oppression. Actually, you have given example of Muktabai Salve, and I would say that that student who writes the essay actually, or you look at the poem that I have just read about, Savitri Bai Phule's poem actually. It talks about that actually. That's the kind of education, and this included later, Baba Sahib continued this work. This included later establishments of the People's Education Society, which started colleges both in Aurangabad, Milind College and Siddharth College in Bombay, Chokha Meda, establishment of Chokha Meda hostels. Those who are in the Maharashtra, they will understand the importance of the Chokha Meda hostels, for example, the kind of activities that these hostels have produced, actually, kind of the social ideological churning which happened in these hostels, actually. So it is this tradition, I would say, establishing aims, educating the masses about importance, asking for the policy and legal changes to provide education to the masses, and then establishing their own model schools actually, or institution, is the tradition that very, very important for us to reflect on actually. It is due to such efforts of these anti-caste revolutionary, I would say, in British Free India, I call it this British Free India, sometimes it makes us question, are we still free actually? Are we getting the kind of freedom that we had visualized that time? We got an opportunity for education and the constitutional right to education. So legally, we could not be discriminated actually, legally we could not be discriminated, which was not the case in earlier times actually, because technically, scripturally, we were not supposed to get education. So the Article 14, equality before law, Article 15, prohibition of discrimination on the ground of caste, race, gender, etc., etc. Article 16, equality of opportunity. Article 17, abolition of untouchability. And Article 19, the right to freedom. All these fundamental rights, they helped us actually. They helped us to access education if you want actually, but the problem is the spread of education was very, very limited actually, and you can understand the spread from the fact that how the spread was in 1951 census. The crude literacy was on the 18%. I repeat that the literacy rate in 1951 was on the 18%, and you can imagine who might be those people who have got educated at that time actually. What could be the proportion of the people from among the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and OBCs of that time, for the Bahujan that we call, they could be. So that tells us a very narrow spread of education. I'm giving, I'm structured this talk in a way that starts with an historical context. It connects me to the contemporary situation. Then I take you to the what is this rural school design that we currently have, and what it is giving us in terms of the learning outcome and the schooling experiences. Then I will take you through why we have got into this situation, despite we being the followers of Savitri, Jyotiba, Shahu, Baba Sahib, Periyar, and all these people who put so much emphasis on education. We ourselves valuing education actually. And then I would last conclude with what should we do then, and some suggestions about what can be done to change the situation. That's how I have structured my talk actually. As Professor Moharana said, I will take around 1 hour 15 minutes around. I hope I finish faster actually. So that was the situation in 1951. Now Baba Sahib tried actually to include right to education as a fundamental right actually, but he was not successful due to opposition. As you know, the opposition was only Congress, because the Congress was the dominant party that time in the Constituent Assembly actually, and the reasons which were cited were the lack of resources. We do not have adequate resources to make education as a justiciable fundamental right, that the people can go to the court if you are denied education actually. And therefore it was made as a directive principle of state policy. I guess it was Article 45 actually, that time under Part 4. So after, and within 10 years, after 10 years, the government was supposed to accumulate the adequate resources and make it a fundamental right. And that was the deal actually. Now just imagine, we have got this right to education as a fundamental right in 2002. Had we got that in 1950, how many years we have lost actually? Almost 50 years we have lost because of that. India would have been very, very different actually, very different. As I said, you can guess those 18% literate people in India, which caste they might have belonged to actually, 18% people that time in 1951. So despite right to education as a direct principle of state policy, and that means actually there was an obligation on the part of both central and the state governments to make necessary laws and the policies and make necessary resource provisions so that education is provided to all the people up to 14 years of the age actually. Looks like government didn't do it actually. Why they didn't do, we will discuss a little later actually, or why they might not have done. We'll try to guess what might have happened actually. You can guess the situation, what had happened in the 10 years actually. In 1961, the situation didn't change much on the literacy front, and we got only 24% literacy, only 6% rise in the 10 years actually. And that you can imagine the amount of emphasis that the Indian state had put on education of the masses actually. I'm talking about basic education, you're talking about literacy, so that was a neglect of the education. It is in that context they asked Kothari Commission to look for what's going on in education. It recommended for the common schools actually, let everybody's child go to the same school in their neighborhood kind of. It recommended 6% of the gross domestic product should be spent, and that spending should increase to 6% by 1986 actually. We are today into 2020, and even 2020 we are almost half of that spending today together, with center and state together actually, about half, So that's the situation where Indian state has landed us actually. I'm taking you this, and that's where I named this talk as NEP and beyond actually, because among my many activist friends, they say that it's NEP basically which has given a huge blow to the egalitarian education actually, and is NEP going to take us on very? I said NEP probably is a culmination of what we have done in the last 77 decades actually. Even if you remove NEP today actually, it's not going to solve our problems. With NEP, it is not trying to solve our problems actually. I will come to that point as far as in the context of rural education. The another problem with the state policy was the elementary education was neglected at the cost of higher education. Why? We should ask that question, why actually? And who might have got benefited more? Now just imagine the Bahujans, the first generation people, mostly illiterate parents actually, their children wanted to go to the school, and they will go to the elementary school. So if we establish many more schools, hire many more teachers, provide both academic and supporting infrastructure actually, people will get more and more basic education. But the government spent more on higher education. So except first decade actually, decade of 50 to 60 actually, the more money was spent on higher education than on the elementary education actually. And you might understand the reason. Who might have got benefited? I think some of our friends who are in the academia should do the research actually. Which section of the society might have got benefited because of this skewed allocation of the resources from an elementary education to the higher education in the initial decades of the Indian state actually, the British free state? That's the question that we should ask actually. Educationists suggest that actually, 50% of the total amount that you spend in any country should be spent on elementary education, another 25% you spend on secondary education, and the third, another 25% you spend on higher education. I will give an example. There is a paper by Tilak. Tilak is one of the very renowned, education finance expert actually, the country and Bugis. They say that the state of Uttar Pradesh, the state of Uttar Pradesh spends 17 times more on higher education than the elementary education. 17 times more. Which section of the society in a state like Uttar Pradesh might have got benefited by a higher education? Who were in a position to access the higher education? So that's the politics of education and the history I'm talking about, which has landed in what the situation we are in actually. And this trend continued up to the decade of 90s till 1991 when we started new economic policy. And it was at that time the spending on higher education was a cut. It brought down. it was also a time when Bahujan started entering a higher education, because they completed their matriculations, 12th grade, and they started entering in the higher education. That was also around the time when the spending on higher education was cut down. I have a term paper, I'm going to publish it soon, on the financing of higher education, what considerations might have guided the policymakers to do the kind of resource allocation they have done. I'm talking from that actually, so that's a situation actually. This was also a period when the Bahujan started entering higher education, so higher education spending came down. We have one of the highest enrollment rate in the private colleges actually than anywhere in the world actually, and we are one of the not so rich country. We are lower income country. The public spending in higher education was brought down. It was also time when the elites of this country started withdrawing from the government school actually. If you look at the Central Square Foundation's recent report on the private schools actually, they show a 1993, they show a 70% enrollment in a public schools, actually government schools. That drastically comes down to 52% in 2017. It is currently basically almost 50% actually. That report has recently come. So from 74% in 1978 enrollment in a government school was 78.8% in 1993, and in 2017 it is 52%. We are almost now 50%. So that decade of the 90, when the Congress was ruling there, actually, when they brought a new education policy, actually, So two things have happened: withdrawal from higher education by the state, actually, and the withdrawal of the elites from the government schools. And that pressure of the elites to reform those government schools came down, actually. If you believe in the stakes theory, if you do not have a stakes in the policies that you make, the research that you undertake, the decisions that you take, probably how your decisions will be, that's the question open to us, actually. The elites continued in a public higher education like IITs, IIMs. You take Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi University, and many more centrally managed higher education institutions. They continued their, using those institutions. You still now, even now the condition is that both in a faculty as well as the student body, after Mandal Commission, the situation a little bit improved actually. But these higher education institutions still are inaccessible or discriminatory spaces for the lot many Bahujans actually. So we should ask this question: why such policy decisions actually? Low stakes? They did not have stakes, or there were bad intentions? I mean, we have no mechanism to examine that someone's intentions are bad. Actually, there is no research methodology to do that. Actually, So one is low stakes. Actually, the third I would say is, was there something I would call a lack of egalitarian imagination in the policymakers or the policy advisors actually who were there with them actually? Why they couldn't see that all the people of this country need a better quality and equal education? So what can we all do? I had referred one paper actually while writing a paper on equality of education during my coursework actually, and South Korea was roughly around the same time that we were in 1950s actually, and inequality of education was inequality of education was almost similar in both the countries actually. Now our inequality has not changed much actually in those almost 4 decades that the study has. I have that paper, can share with those who are interested. But South Korea has drastically brought down the inequality in education. Actually, I would ask why the policymakers couldn't do that. Actually. So this is where this is the background in which we have got this what we have now, the schooling system. The decades of 80s and 90s saw a lot of social upheaval. The rise of the Mandal movement. There is a rise of in the North India, especially in the largest state in this country, the Bahujan Samaj Party. The Bahujan based lot of Bahujan based parties have risen actually. I mean, Jeffrey Law talks about the silent revolution about that. So there was a domestic demand for expansion of basic education around this time actually. And this combined with the global movement for education for all, starting with Joe Betting Conference on, the World Conference on Education in 1990 and the Dakar Conference in 2000 actually, that made Government of India to bring a Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. For the first time, Indian state brought the idea of Sarva Shiksha, Sabke Liye Shiksha, actually, education for all, actually, it brought. If you look at the history of Indian state before that, one tends to doubt, actually, was Indian state really serious about that, actually? It looks like we were reluctant. J.P. Naik, after he was so frustrated, J.P. Naik was a part of a Kothari commission. He was so frustrated about the lack of proper implementation of the commission's recommendations. Actually, he said Indian state doesn't have a political will. Actually, so it designed the policies. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan was designed in such a way that it got limited only on the enrollment or access and not so much on the learning outcomes or what aims of education that Savitribai visualized from education. Actually, the Sarva Shiksha policy tried to dilute education by bringing the ideas during that time, alternative schoolings, those para teachers kind of ideas, actually. I would call it is this tendency of policymakers and their academic advisors to provide suboptimal solutions to the masses and optimal solutions to the classes that we should caution, actually. Let me elaborate on this point, what I'm trying to say that, actually. It often happens that when we have to provide certain constitutional entitlement to the masses, actually, we design such policy solutions which actually go more for a namesake or a tokenistic than they are in the real sense, actually. So these are more suboptimal para teachers. Why can't you have a full-fledged teachers, actually? I have worked with the government. I have many more friends who in the policy. I have been a student of a policy. There are many more people who are in the economics and all. They will argue that we have resources. If you want resources, we can mobilize resources. Shahu Maharaj was a ruler. He spent much more amount on the education, actually. So it all depends upon your political will, and your political will, I would argue, is a subject or a function of a social will, actually. So this tendency of the Indian policymakers and their advisors, it's important. Policymakers do take advice from the experts in the universities, the foundations, non-governmental organizations to provide or to design suboptimal solutions, even in the health items, paramedical, para doctors, the makeshift hospitals, makeshift centers and all that, actually. So the classes, either because they have access, because they have resources, they can access the better quality schools or services, and the masses cannot because they don't have resources, actually. Now, that's not something we expect to happen in education. So I would call this is the state-led. It is the state-led unequal policy, I would say, unsustainable in a constitution which is premised on equality, actually. And this is an official inequality. We should be very disappointed with that, actually. Now it is in this context you get a Right to Education Act in 2002, and then right to education as a fundamental right, and then Act in 2009. And that act didn't correct this policy blunder fundamentally. What it did was it only abolished alternative schools, and it says no, we will not have para teachers thereafter. But in the state of Maharashtra, last few weeks, some of my friends in the government are sharing with some GOs and all. They have a Shikshan Sevak scheme, for example. It is a backdoor, para teacher from the back door, So this Right to Education Act, it did bring down the out of school children. It did bring down what people call dropouts and what some of us call push-outs, actually, from the schools, actually, and some schools try to fuzz the data. There might be children who are enrolled on the school register, but they don't attend the school. You have to show attendance high, because if you show the true data, then the people who are up in the hierarchy, they will punish you. They don't like it. I have worked in the government, and that's a very normal practice. In hierarchical system, people do not show true data, actually. There might be certain level of error, I would say, on this front. So I talked to a lot of people. My dissertation involved talking with the teachers, parents, Gram Panchayat officials, Sarpanch, school management committee, Panchayat Samiti officials, block education officers, district education committee, Jilla Parishad members, then the diet officials, diet faculty, and the district officials, including district education officer and Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan people, actually. And you get an idea that the Right to Education Act, broadly people say that out of school children kam karna hai, koi out of school nahi hona hai, dropout kam rakhna hai, that's on the enrollment. So this brings me to, so what is this current rural school system design that we have, actually? and what is it giving us in terms of the learning outcomes and schooling experience. And that's exactly my the dissertation fieldwork actually. You might have seen, those who follow education developments, seen a lot of reports by ASER, Annual Status of Education Report, National Assessment Survey. There were certain studies done by Planning Commission also. Pragat Shaikshanik Maharashtra, Learning Enhancement Program of Maharashtra also acknowledged that the learning outcomes are poor actually. The children are not, the grade 3 children, a significant proportion, almost majority of grade 3 children are not able to read the grade 1 text actually. They are not able to do subtraction actually. They are not able to do subtraction, So there are many more problems in learning outcomes, and many states are trying to come with the learning enhancement program. Maharashtra too has come with the learning enhancement program starting from the academic year 2015 actually. So why are learning outcomes poor actually? My dissertation tells me that we have a problem in school design actually. What we did to provide education for all is we provided school in every village actually. Now, if we understand the demography of a village actually, many of the villages are small villages. And we know that there's a migration from the villages towards the urban centers, both for jobs and those who have a little bit financially well off actually for their children's education. They try to move towards urban centers and for all kinds of facilities, health and many other things. My brother's family moved to a town actually for their children's education actually. I had to move out of the village from the 9th standard onwards. So the village's population is coming down actually. So if you start a school in a village, you do not get adequate children. So a general enrollment that I have noticed is you have in a primary school in a grade 1 to 5, you have about or around or less than 60 children in a primary school. In a upper primary school, that is grade 1 to 8, but there are many schools which are grade 1 to 7, you get around 100 children actually. So roughly 10 to 15 children per grade actually. Now, Right to Education Act, it says that up to 60 children, you will have 2 teachers. So we have abolished single teachers. That's a so great thing that people celebrated. It says up to 60 children, you will have 2 teachers. So the 2 teachers are teaching 4 or 5 grades actually in 2 classrooms. So we have what is called a multi-grade teaching. In an upper primary school, you will have 2 teachers from a primary section. For an upper primary section, there are supposed to be for a 6th, 7th, and 8th standard, there are supposed to be 3 teachers, one for maths and science, another for social science, and third for a language. So roughly, broadly, and on average, you take a district average. It is not just about the schools that I have visited. I did intensive field work in 4 schools. I visited around 30 schools in the 2 clusters. I took an average of the district. I looked at also a random average of some other districts in Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. You generally get actually some 2 point something average for primary schools, something 5 points, some average for an upper primary schools. That's the teachers' availability in the government schools currently actually. And that's the state of multi-grade teaching, where the teachers, the raised number of teachers have to teach more grades actually. Now, this contrasts to a curricular principle or NCF and or curricular principle evaluation system is designed in a way that a one teacher teaches 1 grade for 220 school days. Now here, one teacher, instead of teaching 1 grade for 220 days, it teaches 2 classes, sometimes even 3 classes. If you have 5 grades and 2 teachers, one of the teachers will have to teach 3 classes. Okay, 3 classes. Now hold on. This gets complicated then by the fact that there are teacher shortages. Even within there are teacher shortages. So the scheme that Maharashtra has, the Shikshan Sevak, is to fill the shortages. Someone in the middle of the year retires, someone goes on a maternity leave, you do not have a provision to fill that vacancy. So you have, instead of 2, you will run with the 1 teacher. I have seen schools, I have sat with the block education officers where there is a complaint that Falana, so and so school has been locked. Why? Because there was a 1 teacher and 1 teacher that they could not come. He went to the meeting or fell sick, and the villagers have locked the school. Now school has to be opened. You send some teacher from somewhere else. That's the situation we are in. Now that's one is short, but that's still a smaller problem. The larger problem is actually a distraction, I would call. I looked at the registers in the school, but the registers are called movement registers. So teachers have to make entries in that register when they go out of the school for any official work actually. Now, because the schools, these are small schools, they do not have non-teaching staff, no peon or whatever office assistant staff you will call, or administrative or finance clerk or something. They have to go out. They go to the banks, they go for Aadhaar card, they go to the cluster resource center, they go to the block office, they go wherever is required, whoever calls them actually for meetings or wherever. For 1/3 of the year in a 2-teacher school, one teacher is out of the school. And the entries which are made in the register are conservative entries. I have spoken with the teachers and I have spoken with the officials. So if the entry is made for 4 hours, the teacher might not be available on that day in the school, actually, might not come back. Once you go to the block headquarters, you may not come back actually. Or even if you come back 2-3 hours have gone, you're distracted, you lose your focus on the teaching. That's what teachers told you. So there is a distraction actually. So one teacher roughly is out of the school for 1/3 of the time actually. Even when they are in the school, there are distractions actually. The lot amount of the data is asked, they have to manage midday meal and other work actually, Now so that's a distraction is a very, very important factor. I have written in elaborate about giving a lot of examples in my dissertation, then that you combine with inadequate training, both in service and pre-service training, inadequate funds actually, you really, one head teacher called these schools as a below poverty line schools actually. They said these are below poverty line schools for below poverty line children actually. No, that's a description actually. What someone called, it stuck to me. There is another factor which contributes to the learning deficiency is what I call a language difference. The difference between the home language and the school language. It's like I visited some of the schools, some of my dissertation fieldwork involved going to the remote tribal area. And the people speak different tribal language at home actually. And in the school, they are supposed to, the school textbooks and evaluation and the teaching is supposed to be what they call in Maharashtra Praman Bhasha. And Praman Bhasha is a Marathi. Which Marathi it is? It is a Puneri Marathi, they call it actually. It is not even Nagpuri Marathi. What we call this, that is called Jhadi Marathi actually. So there are 2 levels of differences. One difference between tribal language and the locally spoken Marathi, and then this Praman Bhasha, which is Pustaki Marathi or the bookish Marathi, some scholars also called is a Brahmini Marathi, So this language difference actually, if you, and there is a lot more talk, Pragati Shiksha, Maharashtra's documents, government talk about constructivism, Jnana Rachanavad, they talk and what does constructivism means actually? The children bring their prior knowledge to the school and on that knowledge, they build a new knowledge actually. Now, if you don't take cognizance of their prior language, if you don't teach them in their own language, if they are shamed in their own language actually, how are they going to bring their language? Their language, culture, religion, everything else is left out actually. I looked at the progress section in Maharashtra scores actually, and I found there's a difference between maths and language score. And one of the factors which came out is probably this actually, And even the teachers also told that, children make mistakes while writing, they make mistakes while speaking actually, So that's the language is very, very important issue there. And the governments generally expect that teachers who find some solution about bridging the language gap. Then combined with this, there is a block and cluster level and academic support system, which is not currently working. They do mostly an administrative work actually. The accountability system, because there are a large number of schools in a one cluster, there are 15 schools in one block, you might have 150 schools with people do not have transportation facility and all. Your accountability system are poor, your supervision the hardly works actually. I visited a tribal village, a wonderful school. I love that school actually. And they said, besides the cluster coordinator, Kendra Pramukh, they call it Maharashtra, I was the only other person who visited that school apart from up to police officials, because that was having certain security issue in that area. So that is the kind of now that's not the fault of those officials also, because there are too many number of schools actually, and there's too much of the administrative work that they have to do, and they are not able to go. The diet officials say, diet faculty say, we do not have transportation arrangement. Robert Merton has called, there is something called a goal displacement actually. The core goal of the education department is to focus on academics. focus on teaching, focus on improving the quality of education, focus on improving the learning outcomes. And the people are engaged in many more other different things actually, Sometimes they have to celebrate Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and then write a report about that. Some days have to be celebrated. Go and find out how many children do not have toilets in their houses. I have seen the reports like this actually in the school files actually, So the whole lot of things are going on there, So now when we talk about the poor learning outcome, there are three soft targets actually which people generally blame actually. One is the teachers, second are the parents, and third are the students. So people generally say, no, teachers have negative mentality. They don't want to work. They are not serious about teaching. That's one of the feedback that we generally get. Teachers' negative mentality, which has come as a very, very important reason actually during my dissertation actually. And people also write. There was an article in Times of India sometimes back by two very influential people, Pangaria and Gita Kingdon actually, and they say, the teachers' accountability system, since we are not able to fix it, why don't we have give a choice to the parents to go for the private schools? The second factor which people say about is the indifference of the parents. In Maharashtra, they call it Palakanchi Udasinta, Palak Udasinai. The parents are not serious about their children's education. I mean, this is like blaming the victims actually. What do you expect those daily wagers who go to the farms in the morning, come late in the night, they themselves may not have educated, not gone to the schools. You expect them sit with their children for 3-4 hours, do their homework, check their studies, go to the schools. This I would call is a very urban middle class culture where the mothers spend hours and hours with their children. That's not the way you design the system in the rural area. My mother never sat with me. My mother is an illiterate. My father was a 4th grader. They never sat with me. I asked this question to everyone who said that the parents are supposed to sit with their children, get their work done. And I said, have your parents done that? I said, no, our parents have not done that. Why are you expecting that? So there is a nice book on blame the victim actually, So the indifference of the parents want their children to get educated. I have written recently an article on the Global Teacher Prize and I have given a quotation there. Mother said, why are you calling that we are indifferent? We are interested. We want our children to learn. We have certain limitations. We can't spend time. You design a system in such a way that, that you don't expect our involvement in their studies actually, So that's, and the third thing that sometimes people blame is on no detention policy, that students do not study well or they are not serious because they are not failed actually. I mean, that again is like blaming the students actually. I mean, make the school so beautiful, make the teaching so interesting actually, make the knowledge relevant actually. The students will study, they will love the school. Why you need to blame why you need to blame the children about that? Look at the Navodaya Vidyalaya. Poor children go there. I have been talking to the teachers of Navodaya Vidyalaya recently, much more in depth actually. There are many poor children in Navodaya Vidyalaya. They do wonderful job there, So you design a Navodaya Vidyalaya system. There is parents' accountability. Is not there. Parents do not go to the Navodaya Vidyalaya and ask the teachers, are you teaching my children? Is my son doing or daughter doing homework or classwork or not? Officials do not regularly visit Navodaya Vidyalaya to inspect the Navodaya Vidyalaya. You have developed a system, and that's what I would call it actually. So the design of a system and the policy is very, very important actually. So you have designed the system. The problem lies in the way you design the system and the policy. You have designed it to fail. You are not designed it to succeed. If you wanted to design to succeed, you could have picked up the model of Navodaya and Kendriya Vidyalaya and built those kinds of the schools all over the place actually. And that's where I call a problem. Now, education policy accepts the small schools and learning outcome crisis, but it is reluctant to provide bold solutions. It says that we can have a school clusters, school clusters or school complex. Now, school complex is sharing of the resources. It is not going to solve your multi-grade teaching problem. You are not going to get library in every school actually. You are not going to provide a non-teaching staff everywhere. I have written in detail about my News 18 article on that how the school complex is not going to help actually, So the new education policy is not going to help because unless you change the system actually the way you have designed it actually, it is not going to help. When the people brought this, one of the reasons that the people give that there was a transportation is not good to the villages. There is a Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, There are reports, we say, I've spoken with many more my friends who are collectors. Actually, they said almost 90% of the villages are connected. Those villages which are not connected provide the residential schools in those areas, or at least provide in those villages the class, good schools in those areas. So my, I will come to that. Let me pause it here. I will come to that actually. What solution I'm proposing actually. So so that's NEP is about, it accepts small school problem, it accepts learning crisis, actually it talks about foundational learning, but it doesn't take into consideration the problems in the school design and the problems in the policy. In my dissertation, I talk in detail about what I call is, when you bring a new policy, this is something called a structural incompatibility. You are bringing a new policy in a structure which is not designed to achieve the policy goals of a new policy, number one. Number two, I talk about policy incompatibility. You have an existing, what I call a policy family, the family of a policies actually, and you situate a new policy in that family, and that policy is incompatible there. The language policy, for example, does not fit with your the new policy actually. You are not respecting children's language. That when you are not teaching them through their mother language, there is a learning deficit actually because of that, for example. Or your resource policies, your teacher allocation policies, your school location policy. It doesn't align with your goal that we want good quality education to all the children. So it is in this context now we should talk, now understand that these are the rural schools I'm talking about. 2 rooms or 5 rooms dilapidated buildings in the villages. Some have compound walls, some they do not have. Sometimes a poor infrastructure. Many of us should go and visit those rural schools. You really question actually, are these really schools actually? Should we call them schools? Or we should ask, what is school then actually? And come to a consensus, what is the school actually? And accordingly design a system and the policy that this is what the school should be. Now, in this country, we have a very unequal school system. So we have for central government employees, and now they allow state government and some outsiders also, because the officers have started withdrawing their children from the central schools, from many central schools. So for government employees, central schools, you have for rural children, you have a Navodaya Vidyalaya, you have an unaided elite schools, actually very high fee schools, which for example, we charge like more than 50,000 or even a lakh, kind of fees. Then you have a low fee private schools, where those people who cross the economic threshold of their family, they try to send their children in the hope that their children will get better education. Actually, there are studies which say that when the private schools are not able to provide, because your regulatory system is not really great actually. Then you have an unaided private schools actually, and again in those unaided private, mostly the poor children go there actually. So that's the ecosystem, that unequal ecosystem that we are in actually. Now there are proponents of the private schools actually. Who say that the public schools cannot be reformed actually. We have tried and we have failed actually. Teacher accountability cannot fix actually. So let us give parents the choice. Give them the vouchers, for example. Let them go to the private schools. The extent of privatization currently is very, very high actually. In rural area it is less, in urban area is pretty high. In India, I said around 50% of the children go to the private schools. In Maharashtra, they are 74%. In a district like Nagpur, more than 70% children go to the private schools actually. In rural area, in a rural district, somewhere like 25% or I would say 30% of the children might be going. It depends upon the area. It depends upon the area where your village is actually, whether the children go to the private schools or not. There is also a problem here in the sense that there is a preference to the private schools. I have heard complaints from the teachers and the head teachers, and including have seen those cases where the private schools were opened up and were allowed near the government schools actually. One school I remember where they started the convent kind of a thing in a government school. Children started coming there. Then the next year they allowed the convent nearby and the children walked away. They thought our enrollment will improve because of opening of a convent section within the Jilla Parishad government school actually. There is another head teacher who really did a wonderful job in a very tribal village, and that school was transformed so much that it became one of the best schools in the block and then in the district actually. And that head teacher was transferred, and every respondent told me that that transfer was not on the reason that was given on the paper, but because there was a pressure from the private school, because the students started withdrawing from the private schools and come to the government school. So this is the situation of the rural government schools. Actually, I find it very difficult to call them. When you compare those rural Jilla Parishad schools, rural schools, with Kendriya Vidyalaya, Navodaya Vidyalaya, DPS, Singhania, and whatever kind of a private schools you have all around the places in the urban landscape, actually, you really, you feel actually, are these the schools actually? What is the kind of a schooling experiences that the children are getting? What the kind of memories that they will cherish? What is the kind of networks that they will build actually? Are these only cognitive outcomes which are important, or are there other non-cognitive and outcomes which are very, very important? Are the experiences very important? I have too many friends who have studied in Rishi Valley schools or many other elite schools, because the kind of jobs and the educational institutions that I have gone actually, and they keep on talking about their schools actually. They have networks actually, which play a very, very important role actually. How do we compare this with this rural 2 buildings, 15 children, 20 children, 60 children schools where the teachers also inadequate and there is hardly anything happening? One of the teachers told me, sir, I'm very interested in curricular activity. Wonderful teacher actually. He in fact got award also at the district level. He said, I'm very interested in co-curricular activities. मेरे पास बच्चे नहीं है, मैं खो-खो की टीम नहीं बना सकता, मैं कबड्डी की टीम नहीं बना सकता. I don't have those many children there actually. So why we have got into this situation, despite we being followers of, when we say we, many more people, both Bahujans and non-Bahujans, who really believe in the ideas of Savitri, Jyotiba Phule, Shahu Maharaj, Baba Saheb, or in the South, Narayan Guru Periyar and Birsa Munda, who really put premium on education and really made education popular among the masses actually. Because we value education, we put so much emphasis on education, we make so many sacrifices for education. So why we landed in this problem? I have my own speculations about this actually. Someone now a late intern in education for a decade, and someone who has worked in anti-caste movement for 2 decades. So my own observations are how I'm doing on time, by the way, Marna. I have lost.
Yeah, half an hour still left.
Okay, great. Right. So if I'm exceeding, just let me know. Okay.
Yeah.
So my opinion is we became individualistic actually as followers of these great anti-caste educational revolutionaries, if I call thinkers actually. We became individualistic actually. So while valuing education, we sacrifice everything to get best possible education to our children, including myself actually. But we didn't bother to create a movement actually, and I emphasize, we didn't bother to create a movement to reform public school systems actually, both in rural and urban area actually. That's a very missing things. Education lena chahiye. I have grown up in this Vidarbha actually, and they phate hue kapde pehno, bhooke raho, lekin bachcho ko padhao. My father in late 80s sold the land. We become landless in the late 80s actually. And one of the major reason was I was in the 12th and I need to pay tuitions and all that 9th, 11th standard. There was a plan to go to the engineering and all that kind of thing. And that was one of the reasons. Besides that, there was hardly any irrigation and you were not getting any agriculture output, and my father was sick and all actually, And I know many more examples there actually. People making too many sacrifices to send their children because they have understand education as the most important instrument of liberation actually. But for them, educate, organize and educate means send your children to best possible schools, spend as much money as possible. But we didn't come together and build a movement or build a campaign to reform the public schools. So huge amount of a private out-of-pocket expenditure from the Bahujans, poor Bahujans and lower middle class Bahujans, I would say. The second thing that we didn't do is we didn't build expertise and institutions to technically understand what's going on in the field of education. I'm talking about education as a discipline and education as a sector actually. Someone now, who have gone to US now to study this, I had applied for, I took a course in Harvard. I was admitted in Teachers College in Columbia, So I had spent good amount of time and understand discipline and all that various disciplines. When I joined Ajib Premji Foundation 2011, and thereafter I came in touch with many more NGOs, the researchers, academia, I hardly found any Ambedkarite, fully Ambedkarite Periyaris who specializing in some discipline of education among the Bahujans. Very few. Someone who is a sociologist of education, anthropologist of education, finance of education, economist of education, the policy, education policy, you call infrastructure education. There are many more things, curriculum, philosophy of education, or psychologist of education or something like that. We didn't build actually. And that and especially from this anti-caste perspective, looking from equity and aims of education perspective, the kind of aims that Savitribai Phule wanted us to pursue, actually, so we have missed that point, and that therefore we are missing from this education research, advisory, and advocacy ecosystem. I emphasize this, actually. I repeat, actually. The Bahujans anti-caste thinking, Bahujans are missing from education research, advisory, and advocacy ecosystem. Now, this has resulted in a lack of representation in policy making and strategic decision making, both in the government and outside the government. As I said, the policies are made in the government, but there are outside non-governmental actors, both foundations and the NGOs and academia, research and think tanks, actually, who influence government. I have been both inside and outside. In fact, my first dissertation was supposed to be on the representation education. One of my good friends who were my well-wisher told me that I might not get data on the caste background, and therefore I should, do it later, actually, not this. They say best dissertation is a done dissertation. So I have kept that in the hold, but I spent 3 semesters on the representation idea, actually. So the Bahujans are missing from this strategic decision making in education, and that has resulted, actually, and therefore this entire school education decision making, because I'm talking in this context, has become sans Bahujan, actually, resulting in what NCF focus group. There was a wonderful focus group report, actually, led by Tata Institute of Social Science, a sociologist of education, and that report calls what that report called 2005 report I'm talking about. It calls as, in the name of indigenization, what has happened in last 50 years is a Brahmanization of education, and the Brahmanization is going to happen because the non-Brahmins, the Bahujans, are not represented in that entire educational discourse, official discourse, and the policy making, actually. The focus group also talks that there is absence of anti-caste epistemologies of the Periyar, the Phule, the Ambedkar, and those kind, whereas the Tagore, Gandhi, Tagore, Gandhi, and Krishnamurti, they find much more mention, actually. So that's the situation. So that's what we did. The second reason. The third reason, I think, actually, whatever attention we paid to education, in my opinion, coming again from within the movement, actually, was mostly centered on discrimination in education spaces. Very, very important. There is a lot more discrimination happening in education spaces, more so in higher education, more so in, and this is the second area which we focus, activists and the movements have focused, is on coaching the students for admissions to higher education institutions, or going abroad, or whatever kind of a coaching, or mentoring civil services, appearing for a GR and whatnot. There are too many good coaching institutions which have emerged as a social initiative, actually. And the third thing that we have focused is the scholarship, actually. There is a fourth area which sometimes brings the people on the roads, actually, especially making the peaceful protest on the within constitutional framework, is that when you try to tamper with the syllabus, Baba Saheb's cartoon was brought, actually, not many people have come on the road, actually. But what goes on into what we call a technical apparatus of education, the policy of education, resourcing of education, design of a system, the policy instruments, actually, we are really not able to intervene there, actually. So systemic reforms of the rural public school, therefore, did not come on our agenda. And the tragedy is, even the urban municipal corporation schools were also ignored, actually. That's the tragedy. You don't find even the movement, actually, and I'm sitting in the Vidarbha, actually, and having friends in not all kinds of movements, actually. It is really not on our agenda, actually. Two important schools, Jilla Parishad, Gramin schools, rural schools, and urban municipal schools. The movement should have these two important eyes on in front of their eyes, and focus on that. We have ignored that. So the Bahujan middle class like me, actually, which came from the government rural schools, either in rural or urban area, we can't abandon them in favor of what we call individualistic solutions, actually. We prioritize individual mobility or individual mobility, in favor of a collective emancipation, actually, and there is a debate always. That's very always contesting debate. Individual mobility versus collective emancipation, actually. We did critique commercialization. Movements do critique commercialization. Movements do critique privatization, actually. But we have not provided or demanded an alternative, equal, and robust system, actually. And that all because basically we didn't build our expertise. We made many more engineers. We sent our children to IITs and engineering colleges, medical colleges, management institutions, now sending abroad. Very few of us are sending our children to specialize them in various disciplines of education. And that has landed in the problem of what John White calls sectionalism. There's one of my favorite philosopher from UK actually. He calls sectionalism. He says that sectionalism is something of phenomena where one section of society takes crucial decisions about the education of other section of the society. And he asks the moral question: what moral right you have? What moral right one section of the society has to take the crucial decisions about the education of other section of the society? Education is a collective good, and therefore all section of the society must participate in the decision-making process. Actually, if you look at therefore the design now, it is in this situation. I would say lot more people feel that, and there are some people feel that, are these government school can be reformed? Can they do well? What should we do? Should we open our own private school? Should we go to the private school? Should government give us fees? There is a 25% RT quota. Some people get excited about that and all. In my opinion, public schools actually need to be strengthened. Actually, now we have a very good example. If you look at the design, the working, and the outcomes, learning outcomes, both cognitive and non-cognitive outcomes of Kendriya Vidyalaya, Navodaya Vidyalaya, or even the Swera schools, those social welfare society residential schools in Telangana that our friend Praveen Kumar, who's a police officer, is leading. Actually, those schools examples tell us that they are doing a wonderful job. You look at the alumni network of the Kendriya Vidyalaya, Navodaya Vidyalaya, the Swaros actually, and they are doing a wonderful work actually. So why can't we replicate that? Actually, they are doing even better than many private schools actually. So what tells us is that if you have a political will, and if that political will is driven by a social will, and a social will in the caste society is problematic, and that social will can be shaped by the social movement, I would say actually. I would say that the public schools, these public schools have demonstrated that they can work, they can give us a better education. There might be debate on the content of education, the pedagogies actually, the aims of education. But someone like me who have worked in anti-caste movement got impressed by the thinkers like the Paulo Freire, and who says that, don't expect oppressors to provide a liberatory education to the oppressed. It is the oppressed who will provide a liberatory education to the oppressors, actually. So the state-run schools always will be dominated by the agenda of the ruling parties, actually. But they need to have some basic minimum standards, actually. The movements, informal education is very, very important. The model schools are very, very important. The role of family is very important. My son goes to the normal ordinary school. And I can give an example. His teacher asked him, okay, how do you celebrate Diwali? Write in Hindi. Hindi mein lekhe aap Diwali kaise celebrate karte? My son writes, I do not celebrate Diwali. We do not celebrate Diwali. There is another question in Hindi. It asked him, what dishes your mother makes on Diwali? And my son wrote actually on that. He says, we do not make any dishes on Diwali because we don't celebrate that. Now I'm not against Diwali, but my son is not falling into that trap that basically you are trying to coax me into basically celebrating, appreciating Diwali, which I don't actually. It doesn't actually. So he's one of the lowest grades in his earlier classes were in the chanting actually. He said, I don't like chanting. Now that is the kind of a culture that might be at home actually. So the homes, movements, informal education plays a lot more important role actually. I have not become activist because of an education. Sometimes I have become activist despite education actually. But education, the schools of my time, all mostly government schools up to except the Brandeis University that I am currently in actually, they have provided me a decent education actually. In the decent education, I learned good things, both my personality development, co-curricular activity, the learning outcomes, reading, writing, my command over the language. I studied Marathi medium and all that. They gave me those things actually, good experiences actually. So to summarize, actually, I would say what I have discussed till now, because then I'm coming to what should we do in the last 10 minutes. So the genesis of the problems of the rural skill lies, I would say, in the system and the policy design, I would say. Because of the deficits in the system and the policy design, due to lack of political will actually. And that lack of political will is because of a lack of social will. And that lack of social will is because of the historical reason that the kind of society that we are in actually, a lot of rules of the caste system apply there, both also patriarchy, denial of education to women. And that's the kind of context Savitribai operated, where when she opened school for girls, she was opposed actually in many of the Indian Brahmin schools. And especially even those marriages and all, widow marriages and their help that she was trying to do. So what should we do? What can we do actually? My suggestion is anti-caste movements. We are today talking on the occasion of Savitribai Phule Jayanti, and I'm talking about, I guess, to those academicians, the students, researchers, as well as an activist who have certain amount of respect actually about Savitribai Phule's and Jyotiba Phule's work, and those anti-caste thinkers who try to build the movement on education, who try to put their trust on the faith in education, saying that it is this education which will liberate us. We don't have lands, we don't have businesses actually, we don't have sharing power actually right now, but it's education will liberate us. So what should we do? What can we do? The anti-caste movements, activists, academics must take the mission of Savitri, Jyotiba, Shahu, and Baba Saheb more seriously. And we need to build a campaign of the reforms for public education. We need to ask for proportionate representation in all policy and strategic decision-making bodies at central, state, district levels. More importantly, research and advisory bodies too, actually. We shouldn't tolerate any sectionalism, actually. Education is a collective good. Actually, in all sections of the society must have a say. Not for the sake of tokenism, that there is a committee and then you put one scheduled caste member and not someone who really brings an Ambedkarite or Phule insights there on the committee, but someone in the name of what is called nominal representation, not nominal, but substantive representation, which is very, very important. We should ask for that. The reforms in education will be very, very difficult without substantive representation in educational decision making. Build sectoral and disciplinary expertise in education and institution. But I'm not saying that representation should wait for that, actually. We should build the expertise in education and build institutions, actually. This Bahujan mass attraction towards technology, medicine, and management has been helpful to the extent, but it is not the only thing that we need to do. We need to build expertise in different neglected areas, because that will help the society in the long run. We must remove the legal discrimination under Right to Education Act. And what I call legal discrimination is because the Right to Education Act actually, if you read that Article 21A along with Article 14, which says that there shall be equality before law, and Article 15, which there shall be no discrimination on the basis of caste, creed, sex, gender, and the place of birth. You tend to wonder actually, the people who are born place of birth in the rural area, why are they getting suboptimal and substandard schooling experiences actually, So Right to Education Act must recognize an important principle, that the equality of education is an important fundamental principle. It is a constitutional principle. We keep on talking about that. So this means we will require an equality of norms actually. And norms, I means, what is, when you open a new school, you have certain norms and standards. So many classrooms, so many teachers, libraries, timetable, evaluation systems, accountability systems, processes, policies. Actually, you have reasonably good norms for two public school systems. Actually, Navodaya Vidyalaya, Kendriya Vidyalaya. You can also pick up certain examples from the Sparrow system of Telangana. And make those norms universal. Make that norm for everyone. Actually, whether you are in the private school or government school, whether you are whatever board you are. Actually, whichever board you are. I mean, I do not. Having come from education, I do not feel the boards make too much difference actually. I have come from the state board. There are too many friends of mine who have come from the state boards actually, who are doing wonderful in the career and the profession and the society actually. So if you have equal norms actually, so that will really help, and that should become the legal provision actually. We also need to make what is called equality of per child expenditure. If you compare the per child expenditure in Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan schools in the rural area, and you compare per child expenditure in Navodaya Vidyalaya, that's the residential limit. Compare that with the Kendriya Vidyalaya, which is the day schools actually, you find a huge amount of difference. At one point of time, when I compared few years before, when I was writing a paper for Harvard, there were almost 10 times more. I repeat, 10 times more actually. Why you should have? In the same country, the citizens under the same constitution, why these two children coming should not have entitled for the similar per child expenditure actually? Can we make an equal society if we have an equal education? That's the question we should ask actually. We also need to make education in the home language. This is the long subject actually. People feel that, even many activists feel that English should be a medium of education. I understand English is an important language to learn in this today's world actually. But that does not require us to change the medium of instruction. You can have from the preschool level teaching of spoken and written language from the best possible teachers that you can have, so that people understand. I studied in Marathi till my 10th standard. I studied alphabets A, B, C, D from the 5th standard actually. Okay, so you can teach them English separately as one teacher, but have the medium of instruction at least in early grades up to 5th grade in their mother tongue actually. I have written in detail on an article called Language Trap on Veliwada, and friends who are more interested can refer this. We can talk in question and answer actually. So operationally, how do we create these equal schools in the rural area, for example? I would say that we will need consolidation, because these are smaller schools. There is a good amount of literature on the school consolidation, and in 1930 to 1980, 50 years in US, almost 1 lakh schools were consolidated actually. So we need a consolidation. Generally, one cluster in the rural India in the educational system consists of around 15 villages actually. If you combine these 15 skills together and identify a land and build a really a school of a Kendriya Vidyalaya type based upon the same norms, I say, build that and provide a legal right for a transportation, you get a good number of teachers. You not only will have a monograde teaching, which means one grade, one classroom, one teacher, you will have an extra teacher. So some of them might be interested in physical education, sports, music, arts. Some of them can look at other supporting activities. So there can be many more supporting activities. You can have a non-teaching staff. You can have substitute teacher if someone is sick, goes on a leave, goes on a training. You can provide. We do not have any mechanism of substitute teacher that the Western countries have. For example, if your regular teacher goes out of the schools, you have no mechanism. School is left. The Marathi may they called is just say. To use the word, they said, जसं कळपांना सांभाळतो आपण तशा प्रकारे मुलं सांभाळायचा प्रयत्न करतो आम्ही. If there is a one teacher in a school, and instead of 4 or 5 teachers, actually what that teacher will do, the teacher ensure that children do not make the noise actually. That's what the teachers told me. So what I'm proposing is, and I have written on this actually, is a consolidation of the schools to make the school equals. If you have some other ideas people have, I mean, these are welcome. But what I'm saying is we need an equal education. The one feasible way could be to do a consolidation and provide transportation as a legal right. And I'm emphasizing this, very important, because one of the fear is, in some cases, even Maharashtra government is closing the schools with less than 20 children. They say on paper we will close it, but they're less than 10, they have closed actually. And they provide some money so that parents can hire auto or something like that. That doesn't work. There might be dropout, there might be problems actually. I have gone to those villages, remote villages. There are school vans and school buses, yellow buses and school vans. In any case, go to the villages. So what is the problem that government making arrangement, for that, if you build a school actually? I recently got access to the decision of Madhya Pradesh government. They have come in with a scheme called CM Rise scheme actually, where they are trying to consolidate schools and provide a transportation actually. The economics of this actually, this consolidation has been, there are studies on economics, economic ground. The consolidation is very feasible actually. I'm more than economic ground, I am arguing on educational ground, both in terms of the kind of education that the children get and schooling experience. I think we will need those Kendriya Vidyalaya type of school. So I have spoken with some friends, on this. I have discussed this both with the civil servants, my field work. A lot of people I have spoken about this. What is their idea of the schools actually? And that tells me that this transformation of the rural school system is doable. Actually, it's feasible. Actually, what we need is a will. So I would conclude that radical transformation of rural education is a must actually. We have 70% of the people living in rural area. We have farmers protests going on. One must link actually the education in the rural areas, the villages, with the farm productivity and the farmer's life actually. What if they have a well-educated children in those villages actually? How that will interact with the agriculture actually. How that will aggregate with TISS Turjapur deals with the rural development actually. If education is, just imagine one generation of the children. provided education in a schools like Kendriya Vidyalaya and Navodaya Vidyalaya. Imagine an India, a society and the country in the next 15 years, for example, if one generation. It will be wonderful change, I guess, actually, because the kind of people I keep meeting, actually, those coming from these kind of schools, actually, there is a lot more difference, actually. The Bahujans have come from this reluctant schoolings, reluctant schoolings, this kind of schools, and they are still doing wonders. Many of us are first generation learners, actually. Now, just imagine a generation coming from the better quality schools, the decent schools, actually. I think the social and the political landscape of this country is going to change. And that's where I would say that the academia, the activists and the movements and the policymaker should see this as an important opportunity, basically. So I would say that it will just be a very big game changer, not just in the Bahujans transformation, but both in the sustenance of democracy and also building of this nation, actually. This is my dream, and you can call it an utopian dream, actually. But having been in a movement, having read, having made many activists, actually, I have no problem with having an what people call it impractical, idealistic, utopian dreams, actually. When Baba Sahib argued in Roundtable, he was the only one to argue in Roundtable Conference for universal added franchise. People questioned that, oh, how are we going to do this? That's not feasible. Baba Sahib said, if you agree in principle, the feasibility is the second question that we can work out, actually. Operationalization is the question, actually, that we can work out. If we agree in principle, we can definitely work out, actually, how we can transform the education. And I think education should become the good politics, actually. Education can give good political evidence. Delhi government has shown, actually, Delhi government has shown, there are problems in that model, actually, but I would say it still brought education on the political agenda. We are at a stage now, many state governments are trying to implement the national education policy recommendation. They have formed the task force. This is a good time for us to intervene. So I would say that if we really talk about these, build a public opinion, build a discourse, this purpose of this talk would be served. I would repeat that line of the Savitribai, go get the education of Savitribai Phule's poem, actually. Go get the education. And I would add that, and for that, get the control over the reins of the public education. Thank you. Jai Bhim, Jai Savitri.
Thank you so much, Tanuj. And it's such an important issue for democratization of so-called democratic society like India. When we see education as a resource in a democratic society, that has to be shared equitably, not equally, equitably. So therefore, in that case, as Mr. Tanuj said, primary education should get its adequate share. It should not be, the higher education should not be taking the lion's share, and the masses should be starving. So Amartya Sen has written one essay on social exclusion in 2000, whereby he was explaining why this East Asian miracle has happened. East Asian countries like China, Korea, Singapore, Japan, they have gone much ahead of this countries like India, for example. It's primarily because they have shared the resources equitably, like land, education, and also healthcare. Whereas in contrast to this East Asian miracle, we have South Asian debacle. The South Asian countries are lagging behind because our resources are still controlled by the minority few. So the feudal ecosystem is still prevailing, where the minority is controlling the majority of the resources, and thereby, as Mr. Tanuj said, there is a need of a revolution. I mean, a movement, strong movement that will become also a political agenda for the masses, that let there be equal education for all, not in a tokenist sense, but in its substantive manifestation. Actually, everybody, irrespective of wherever they are, rural, urban, slums, or in posh elite areas, everybody has to go. Get good quality education, and what we would bring in, what Anil Sadgopal and all are talking about, are advocating for a common school system, which was there more or less earlier before 90s. Everybody should go to a common school. Of course, before 90s, these common schools were not very far from being desirable, but we need to make desirable schools, and where everybody will go, and where a democratic value can emerge, democratic development of the society can emerge, and thereby we can also become like Korea or
And
Japan.
so much,
Uh,
special gratitude to Mr. Tanuj Meshram for accepting our request, because when I read his article in Roundtable India recently, just 2 weeks back, he wrote an article on this Global Teacher Award that was offered to, bestowed on a teacher from Maharashtra. So there was a critical analysis of that award, the politics of recognition of certain teachers, and that too in the age of privatization of education. An NGO which is involved in private sector education is recognizing the contribution of a government school teacher. So you all can read that article from Roundtable India, and many other articles of Tanuj Meshram from News 18 and other sites. In the flyer, in fact, I have given his face. He has, in fact, shared his Facebook and other social media profiles. You can go and read those articles, which are really insightful. And I'm also personally very happy to know somebody who is working on education sector, that too in Maharashtra, and we are also involved in some kind of intervention in the education sector in government school, that is the municipality school in Tuljapur. uh, I am looking forward to talking to you more, discussing more about how we can go ahead with those educational projects, but more on that later. But for the time being, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and coming and talking to all of us. Thank you very much.
Me, and this is a very good place to talk about all these things actually. Thank you, Professor Jare, and everyone else who attended and those who made this arrangement for that. It was wonderful talking and good questions, good conversations. I hope that we take these things forward and we really work towards making education equal. Actually, thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.